RJ, as we kick off this Emerald City Hockey post-game live, echoes of a game from last week against Tampa Bay Lightning, where Kraken come out strong, play great, and then there's a timeout, and that's the end of that.
Yep. And actually, that's something that I believe Vince Dunn mentioned at the first intermission, that right, it's giving flashbacks of that game. And like that game, it just feels like the Kraken, again, they weren't able to really do anything about it. They were watching it happen. They were aware of it. And just like that Chicago game, after Yanni comes out and gives that first intermission interview saying, this is unacceptable, it's bad, we need to stop this, nobody was able to do anything to stop it.
I was going to say, interesting choice to use the word aware, RJ, as what, 5 of the 6 goals tonight, maybe 4, just seem to come from plays in which the Kraken, hockey sense wise, just kind of aren't there, or they're a step behind recognizing the play, or they just, they're thinking one step ahead and they just don't make the easy play that they need to. And then there's a turnover. It really felt like so much of this game, RJ, came down to the Kraken just kind of losing concentration in very key moments, and then Vegas jumping on those mistakes from the Kraken. And really, it's not even like I'm saying the Kraken, but a lot of it was really just the Kraken blue line today.
Right. It was that group of defensemen, and it wasn't just any one defenseman, too. I mean, you had plays from Vince Dunn, Adam Larson, Brandon Montour, Riker Evans there at the end on the last goal. Like, it was everybody on the blue line, and it was these turnovers, often from below the goal line, that are just really simple plays that can't happen, where you turn it over cleanly behind your own net. I mean, they'd be the first to tell you that. They know they're not supposed to do that. And yet it happened 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And Vegas is a good team. They're going to kill you on those. This is not like Chicago, where maybe you can get away with that a little bit, or Ottawa even. Vegas is going to put all those in the back of your net.
And they did, right? And that's ultimately how you get to this final 6-2 score. Want to take a moment here at the beginning of Postgame Live to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for hopping over and becoming our Postgame Live sponsor. I mean, I know if I was at the beer hall, RJ, and I think anybody who was watching this game at the beer hall, I mean, you are in a good place to, maybe partake in one of the namesake items there after one of these. I'm sure that probably help a little.
Yeah, drown your misery just a little bit, I think, is an option that the people would have available to them, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, that, or, have a nice burger, have a sorrowful pretzel. How's that?
Yeah. And hey, you could go back tomorrow and you've got 2 chances to be happy, right? You've got the Seahawks playing, an NFL Sunday, you've got the Kraken playing again, this time against Colorado. So at least, you've got 2 chances.
Yes. And speaking of people happy this evening, RJ, Maddie has gotten engaged. And so I already see everybody saying congrats to Maddie in chat, but definitely want to throw one in from myself as well. That is awesome.
Yes, congrats, Maddie. That is so awesome to hear. Best news of the night, really. And thank you for putting that in chat. We appreciate it. And I don't want to pry, but if you don't mind, like, how did it happen? What what's the story? It's awesome. Yeah. I always love hearing engagement stories.
And tonight,
like stories.
A good story, a feel good story, probably good for everyone in this one. So if you feel like sharing, go for it, Maddie. Going in the chat here, RJ, because I'm sure we're going to address things. I know there's stuff I want to talk about. I'm sure there's stuff you want to get off your chest from this one as well. Oh, actually, we've got a super chat here. I'm just not expecting one of these at all. But thank you very much, Sergey. I think we should call this season over. What is frustrating is that after we lose Yanni and Turbo, we only seem to be worse. We have 3 first-round picks and nothing. Talking about, I guess, the prospects there. I mean, as far as calling the season over, yeah, I mean, this is feeling like any chance at the playoffs is truly slipping away. Like, that is gone.
Yeah, this is kind of the week you can point to, and if we're just being real about where the Kraken are right now, I mean, they are currently 7 points out of a playoff spot, and almost all the teams that they're chasing have games in hand on them. So that'll end up being 9 or 10 points right now, and that is a huge gap to overcome, especially considering that there's 4 or 5 teams you'd have to climb over, according to most models that are out there publicly. But going into today, it was roughly in the 4 to 5%. I can't imagine it'll be much higher than maybe 2% tomorrow once the results of this game are factored in. Everything is slipping away from them right now as far as a playoff spot. It looks very unrealistic at this point.
It's such a bummer too. I was really hoping they could hold on until the end of the year. We could at least enter the new season with kind of some hope, some optimism, but a lot of that has just kind of really been taken away from a lot of Kraken fans, right? Being in the Discord, being, in chats here. This rough stretch after, they had just bounced back and everything was feeling good and it felt like they were trending upwards. It has really just kind of gone all over again. And it is frustrating. Sergey mentions losing Yanni. Turbo leaves for a little while in this one. Yanni does come back in this one. RJ almost leads all centers in ice time in this one. Yanni Gord with over 17 minutes. That being said, right, you heard Edzo talk about it on the broadcast. We've been talking about it, here. Once Yanni comes back, we would put him on the wing, or at least I would put him on the wing. I won't speak for you, but I would put him on the wing. You heard Edzo talk about it in this one as well. So, just because that's the last time you were doing something, right? You had Yanni's energy out there on the wing. Capo Caco still, integrating into the lineup. I thought he had a better game in this one. He did do some good things out there, but it's still tough. He's only been with the group for 3 days. Haven't really had a chance to practice or go over everything yet. This really did feel like if Yanni Gord was out there for that line, specifically RJ, because that line got caved in, that Matty Beniers line might have helped something.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you on the winger thing. I know you said you didn't want to speak for me, but in that case, it's totally fine because I agree with you. And I thought it might happen given that they called up Ben Myers today, as well as Gustav Olofsson, but they called up Myers. And so I thought part of that might be to give them the flexibility to put in Myers, who's a center, and then you could move Yanni over the wing and it would create that for you. And maybe that's something that they're going to look at for tomorrow, or that they were originally even thinking for tomorrow, but not tonight. Yeah, I would like to see Yanni Gord at wing. He was really effective there in elevating, every line that he was on, but the problems just go so deep at this point.
It really does. Shane Wright was able to get a point. I will say this because, mentioning things at the bottom, right? Matty's still struggling. We talked about Yanni Gord, maybe could help him out. Shane Wright line was actually like your one good line this evening. Like Shane Wright was able to kind of help elevate playing with Andre Burakovsky and Jaden Schwartz. I said before the game on Discord that I actually thought there might be some method to the madness there of taking Eli Tolvanen and Oliver Bjorkstrand away from Shane Wright. I'll get kind of more into that a little bit later. I think there'll be more opportunities for it, but it does kind of go to show Shane Wright this year, RJ, it doesn't really matter what line he's been with. He finds a way to always have positive expected goal differential, whether he gets on the score sheet or not. And he does pick up an assist that's, very late in this one, but they were the only line that managed to outshoot Vegas this evening.
Yeah, and that line was good, and I liked reading your response there because my thought, it was kind of a response to what I had said with that line shakeup in the centers, saying that just I was kind of disappointed that it felt like you had Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen who had been playing so well and really doing a good job helping elevate Shane's game, and it felt like you kind of had to move them away from Shane in order so that they could just kind of keep Chandler Stevenson going and make his game a little better, right? That you're having to take these line mates away from Shane, this guy who's so important to the future of your franchise, just to prop up Chandler Stevenson. But your response, and I think it actually played out well in this game as far as how it all went, right? Shane was able to elevate his new line mates. And I was worried about that because you take earlier season Shane, it's very iffy whether he playing with Schwartz and Burakovsky would be able to do that. But I think he did that tonight. And I was actually impressed by his game. And the Stevenson line actually wasn't so bad. I think Tolvanen and Bjorkstrand kind of elevated Stevenson rather than, him bringing the two of them down.
Yeah, no, that it does feel like that move in the lineup really worked out. Other ones, maybe not so much. And I see there's a couple of super chats that reference them. So we'll move on ahead here. First, though, super chat here from Jenna shouting out Striatic, who was on Jeff Merrick's podcast. So Striatic living the dream, or at least our dream, RJ.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I didn't notice that. So thanks for pointing that out, Jen. I got to go back and listen.
I will have to go check it out because I still have not listened yet. Don't get on me. Been busy. JTB Hockey here with the super chat. Outcoached and outclassed tonight. We need Cartier back in the lineup. Hoping for a better result tomorrow. Hashtag bring up Furcus. I mean, he might be able to add a little bit of offense to the lineup, although I do think when you look at like kind of how physical today ended up being, I don't know that Jagger Fergus would have been able to do all too much out there for you. So I still think he needs a little bit more time to bulk up before he can come up. As for being kind of, outclassed, I think that's kind of appropriate given how this game went. Outcoached is interesting, right? And I see there's, another comment kind of about the line blender there from Schultz is the next super chat here. There's the line aspect, RJ, and then there is the fact that, again, as Vince Dunn said, as we talked about at the beginning of this is not the first game in like the last week or so in which you've come out and been ready to go and you've played well, and then the other team takes an action, right? They are able to reverse momentum, and then the Kraken have no answer to try to pull momentum back in their favor.
Right. It's not just the adjustments, but it's the counter adjustments that are made. And yes, I think the Kraken were thoroughly outcoached in this game, and that's not even as much of a comment on Dan Bilesma as it is on Bruce Cassidy. This was a masterful performance from Bruce Cassidy, obviously with the timeout and kind of able to regroup his team and get everybody playing the right way. But then once it was 3-1, just the defensive clinic that they put on, the way that they were able to shut down the Kraken. I think they were up in shots, 7-1, 8-1 halfway through that second period, and just shift their game on a dime. Because in the first period, they were kind of trying to take advantage of opportunities. They were letting it be a little bit more open and free. In the second, it was just shut down defense in a way that so few teams can do. Like that's how they won a Stanley Cup, was playing that kind of D in the playoffs. And then in the third, you go out and you still have the shutdown defense. At a certain point, it felt like they just got a little bored with that, and they decided to just start messing with the Kraken, just toying with them, and opening things up a little bit offensively. But it still felt like they were in control the whole time. At 5-on-5, the Kraken never really were a threat to score, and yet Vegas was still getting all these grade A chances. I hate to say it almost felt kind of like they were playing with their food.
Yeah, there's maybe some elements of that. It's tough to go all the way there, but yes, they did a great job defending their blue line. I mean, the Kraken just had such a hard time getting any sort of, entries into the offensive zone. Those were just not happening in this one. They did a good job of keeping the puck in the Kraken's defensive zone. So by the time the Kraken do break it out, they've got to go on a line change. They're just dumping it in. Vegas is able to go reload and come back out there. They really utilize the long change, especially well through that second period to just completely take away any chance the Kraken had of coming back. We'll get to the line blender in a second because, like I said, that's the next super chat here. As for, Dan maybe calling a timeout after Vegas scores those two quick goals, RJ, and they, really capture that momentum from you. I was a little surprised, and there were some people on Discord kind of asking timeout here, and I was a little surprised that Dan didn't try to get a little aggressive given how the Chicago game went, given how the Ottawa game went. I was a little surprised he wasn't just going to, if anything, send a message, whether you actually use that timeout to make a counter adjustment or not, but at least send a message of like, hey guys, wake up here and try to do something.
Yeah, I suppose I wasn't surprised just because there was maybe a little over 2 minutes left to go in the period. And I feel like most coaches at that point would just try to get to the intermission. And I think that's kind of probably what Dan was thinking there, just given the timing of the period. But if there ever was a time to be aggressive and call a timeout when even you don't necessarily need to, you could try and get to the intermission. That would have been it. In the context of the way the Kraken have been playing, the way these last three losses have happened, when it looked like, oh no, it's happening again, that might have been the time.
Yeah, I would have.
Or even after, I don't know. Did you think that at all after the second Vegas goal when it's 2-1? Because those goals came in such quick succession.
That's what I'm saying. After the second goal, I would.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant after the 3-1 goal.
No. After the 2-1 goal is when I would have personally done it because those happen right away. It's clear momentum has completely shifted. It's 100% behind Vegas. And again, you're talking about two goals that result from kind of mental errors on your own side. I feel like that's a time to call a timeout, and there was time left in the period. I would have kind of
okay, then forget what I said. Yeah, you're right.
Schultz here with the next super chat. The line blender is as frustrating under Dan as it was under Hackstall. Is Karche injured? Seems like a game he should have been in. I think they hadn't scored in their previous couple games. I think they were hoping that Daniel Sprong was going to be able to help them get on the board. I think that's partly why we saw him. It is possible that Ty Karche is maybe dealing with illness or something like that, although I don't believe they've said anything, and they normally would.
Well, yeah, there hasn't been any official update, but they haven't been asked about it. And so that's where I wouldn't be surprised if he was dealing with something. But of course, they're not going to say anything unless they're
Yeah.
asked about it, right? And because they could just, have him as a scratch, and we don't know if we don't ask. But he
Mhm.
was also a surprise scratch, kind of a late scratch. Even the Kraken broadcast had him in the
Yeah.
lineup the other night, and then he wasn't. So that kind of set off alarm bells in my head that something's up. Also, curiously, he warmed up tonight. He did take warm-ups. I saw him
Interesting.
there on the broadcast. That tells me also maybe it's one where he's going to try to go and test it out.
Mhm.
Often that'll happen where if a player's game time decision, will take warm-up, see how they feel. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's dealing with something, whether that's an illness or an injury.
Yeah. Um, as for the lines, like I said, right, the Shane Wright line was actually able to play pretty decently. They got some good matchups out there, but they were at least able to take advantage of those matchups and outperform Vegas when they were on the ice. I thought the Stevenson line did look better. It's arguably the best Stevenson's line has looked this season, actually, even though this, the end result was not great for this game. The line that needs attention, RJ, is the Matty Beniers, Capo Caco, Jared McCann line. On ice shot attempts for RJ,
I knew you're
two,
going to read these numbers.
two for this line. On ice shot attempts against for that line, 20. You're getting outshot 10-1 out there. And look, Beniers and McCann have played together for a long time, but it doesn't look like there's any chemistry between any of those three, right? Like even with Beniers and McCann, who have played together a significant amount, it just looks like they're all on different pages. I really don't know what's going on with that one, but it can't exist tomorrow when you play Colorado.
No, I mean the numbers speak for themselves, right? 2 to 20 shot attempts for versus against, and they did just look disjointed. They looked like they didn't have any chemistry together. And you're right, even between Beniers and McCann, which you might expect better there. I can't blame Capo Caco, of course. He still has not practiced with the team yet, and so it's tough kind of throwing him into these situations. I do wonder. Look, again, I don't even think he was one of the Kraken's worst players tonight. He wasn't bad. I do
Yeah.
wonder if you think about scratching him for the next game. Just again, nothing wrong with him.
Right.
Just give him a minute to breathe and kind of reset before actually getting the lineup. Give him one practice before playing another game for this team.
Right. I mean, I thought it was very curious that he was in the lineup, the day after he was traded for that Chicago game.
You did mention that, yeah.
I really thought that was strange. I would have thought that you could have let him sit for that one, just collect himself after the whirlwind that he had just experienced, getting into town at 1 a.m., all that kind of stuff, and try and really watch this team play. Look at the systems that they play with. Look at the different guys. Look at, you could even tell them ahead of time, hey, we want to put you with Matty Beniers. Watch him out there. Look at the stuff that he likes to do so that when you get in there, kind of what his tendencies are, where he likes to look for his wingers, stuff like that. That just kind of seemed like a natural thing to me, given the time frame of it all. Didn't happen. Again, I did think he looked good tonight, but again, it's also one where he's not getting a ton of ice time because he isn't integrated into the team. He doesn't entirely know what he should be doing out there. He doesn't know Matty Beniers' tendencies or Jared McCann's tendencies at all. So again, it is very hard to blame him for anything, especially because, when the Kraken needed to be physical, he was physical. Right. He would bully his way to the net front. He was doing the things that they brought him in for and what, the Kraken are going to need from him. But I think it was Edzo who brought up, right, game one, a lot of short shifts from him. Right. Like he's just kind of going out there and he's playing like an ultra simplified game because that's really all he knows what to do in this lineup at the moment. And that was just not going to work against this Vegas team tonight at all. So it'll be interesting to see where they have him tomorrow.
Yeah, and then Terrible Lotus saying, so keep the Wright and Stevenson lines and put Yanni back on Matty's wing. Then what? I agree with all of that. And then what I think is that it opens up the spot on the fourth line with Yanni to just put Ben Myers there.
Ben Myers there.
And switch out Karche for Sprong if Karche's feeling well enough.
Right. Or Capo Caco. And then he can just play fourth line and he can just go out there and be a bruiser and he understands fourth line and what that is. And yeah, it sucks because he wanted more from that and the Kraken want more from that after he was stuck in the bottom six for the Rangers, but it's just one game. And then you've got a week to get to know everybody and kind of get worked into the team and everything. But that's personally what I would do. Like that idea for the lineup sounds like something that they should absolutely try tomorrow. Why not? What do you have to lose right now?
Yeah, agreed. You're at the point where you have nothing to lose. You just got to do that. Yeah.
All right, coming over in the chat, Joey. Playoff chase is over. Coco, that was sad. Mason, only able to watch the third period. Here's hoping there's some solace somewhere we can take from the game. I mean, Shane Wright's legit, at least against lower competition. I mean, that is something. He can elevate even, Andre Burakovsky, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
And,
positive.
and as far as, another positive to take too, Philip Grubauer was fine.
He was,
He
yes.
was solid in this game and he did everything he could. The mess in front of him didn't help, but like he was okay. And that's a good sign for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was. There's nothing that guy could have done tonight behind what was happening in front of him at all. Jason, it's like the Kraken score that first goal and think, "See, we can do it. No reason to keep proving it." It does kind of feel that way a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the early power plays are nice. It kind of helps them get the momentum on their side, right? They've done it a few times now in the last week or so, but it does feel like there's a point where they let off the gas if they are able to convert.
Yeah, and Mason, maybe the Kraken think the games in December are golden goal or something. First goal wins. Maybe a little bit. Although that would only make them 500 for their last 4 games. So let's see here. Sam, considering today's the winter solstice, that could explain why the Kraken looked great for the first 10 minutes and then had no daylight afterwards. I do like that. Trying to find an answer somewhere there from Sam. And then Terrible Lotus, dumb question maybe, but why do we dominate the beginnings of some games? A break comes, the other coach shifts their lines and we lose it. Why do we not make a similar shift? Can we not? I think earlier in the season, Dan did do a good job of that, right? Like that second week of the season, they did a great job of kind of making those counter adjustments. That was really something we would kind of hammer home as a point on these post games. As for like, it feels like right now you either can start on time, right? And it's a game like this where you start on time and everything's great, but then the moment the other team shifts and starts, attacking you, you just kind of fall apart. Or you can't start on time and you're really not going to start until there's 10 minutes left in the game in the third period.
Yeah, basically. And you look at, like, I think 2 of these last 4 games, this one and the Tampa game, and I think there's a lot of similarities there, right? Where they dominate the beginning of the game, the other team wakes up. And in those 2 games too, I just think that you're facing 2 really good teams. And even more than the Kraken playing really well to start those games, Vegas and Tampa just were not themselves. They were kind of shell
Mhm.
shocked by what happened early on. And as soon as a team like that wakes up, I think over any long stretch of play, they're just better than the Kraken. Like those are 2 recent cup champions. That just is what it is.
Right. They're cores that understand what they have to do, as far as a personal play level, as far as a personal motivational level. They really kind of understand that. And I do think that, coaching staff wise, like we talked about this during the last game, right? When Jess Campbell was interviewed during the second intermission. And everything Jess was saying was all of the stuff that the Kraken did need to do to make those adjustments. So again, and we get this a lot, right? The coaching staff does these second intermission interviews. They're saying all the right things. You got to assume they're telling the players that if they're telling us. It's then kind of on the team to kind of go out there and actually make those adjustments. And it does feel like that's where the breakdown is right now.
Yeah, and it's even perplexing too, because you look at last game, what Yanni was talking about in between the awful,
Mm-hmm.
unacceptable. He was saying, we're feeding their transition. We're like turning pucks over up high. We need to just get the puck in low and work down low. He knows what they need to do. The coaches know it. They're telling the players know it.
Do
And
it.
it's not being done. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It almost makes it more frustrating because it's like
Right.
everybody's acknowledging that the problem exists. And yet the problem is not kind of being addressed. Matthew, do we think Capo Caco is going to take 20 games to get acclimated, like Dan said about him setting the new culture earlier? I don't think 20 games. But I do think it's going to take just some practice sessions, right? I think that seems reasonable. It wouldn't surprise me if really after this upcoming kind of week off, I know the team doesn't necessarily do a ton of work together, but it wouldn't surprise me if for that game back, that first home game back, if he's kind of got more of a handle on what the Kraken are doing, he's able to take those longer shifts and is able to kind of, play the way the Kraken want to play as far as getting up the ice quickly. He'll be able to attack more in the offensive zone, understanding when guys go into the corner here, I should play over here, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think really all it takes is 1 or 2 practices because it's just there's so many reps in a practice where you can kind of get used to that and get the tendencies. Obviously, it gets better over time. You don't get to 100% after that, but you get a good deal of the way there. And then we've got a super chat here from Schultz. What did you think of the D pair Monty and Riker? They did actually play a little over 8 minutes together in this one. They were a proper D pair. They got caved in like a lot of the other D pairs. I mean, they were, what shot attempts 7 to 15 against, shots on goal 1 to 8 against, goals 0-2 against. I don't know. I mean, the D pairs were all under pressure, and I think cracking under the pressure. There weren't really any D pairs that I liked tonight.
No, I don't think any of them played well. I do think that, in light of Will Borgen being gone, they're trying to figure out what their everyday rotation is going to be. Obviously, it seems like Dunn Larson is untouchable. Most nights, I think that that's fine. Tonight, maybe a shakeup there would have gotten them going a little bit. But I understand that. And yeah, I think there is an element to RJ of, Riker Evans has played in big moments and had big, opportunities with the Coachella Valley Firebirds under Coach Dan Bausma. Dan Bausma trusted him a ton, especially last year in Coachella Valley. I think Dan knows what Riker is capable of. And I do think it seems like every chance he has, he does want to throw Riker higher up in the lineup and kind of get him some more ice time out there and kind of give Riker the opportunity to do that at the NHL level.
Yeah, no, and I think that is something that they're going to want to look, because Dan trusts him, right, from the time in CV. He could get more ice time than he has been getting. I think they're going to look for time, and especially when they're trailing the game like this too, you're going to want to load up with those puck movers a little bit more.
Yeah. And again, I don't know how much we can read into the numbers of it because the numbers are just atrocious across the board for all of them. Let's see, from Storm, Schwartz goal first by a forward on the Kraken since the Panthers game. Team looks very disconnected at 5-on-5. I agree with that. Although, again, tonight you're able to get two lines kind of going in a positive direction, at least from an expected goals share percentage. Really kind of all or nothing in this one for the Kraken. Interesting though, Schwartz, just to kind of take a moment, and I thought about before this game maybe saving it for the deep dive, but I think just because of how this game went, might want like maybe something good to hold on to, and that is Jaden Schwartz. RJ seems like an analytics enigma to me anyway, and my beginner level understanding of all of these things, right? And that is, if you look up Jaden Schwartz kind of for the season from an expected goal share standpoint, or especially like high danger goal share percentage on like natural stat trick at 5-on-5, he is like, over 10 percentage points better than Andre Burakovsky or Chandler Stevenson, and yet he has spent the most time with them. So I am really wondering, and we saw him away from Chandler Stevenson in this one, just how good is Jaden Schwartz away in the limited time he's been kind of away from those guys, or at least away from Chandler Stevenson, that his numbers could be that drastically different than the two of theirs?
That is a good question, right? Because he has spent a lot of time with those two. Maybe he's just playing great and was kind of dragged down by that particular pair, maybe just not meshing the way that they could or should. But that's something to think about. And I know even when I do all my armchair GM streams, as I'm looking at, okay, if you're going to make the big changes, right? Buy out Burakovsky, buy out, like, just get rid of some of the other forwards, trade Bjorkstrand, whatever you're going to do to shake things up. I always find myself keeping Jaden Schwartz on the roster.
I think there might be something
he's looked pretty good this season.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention that tonight. Like I said, I'm going to
Fusion Mix saying Schwartz doesn't play like anyone else on this team, and I think there is an element of that. He does things that other guys don't do,
especially when it comes to those like high danger chances. Him being the one kind of consistent net front presence that this group has always had, I think kind of feeds into things there as well. Let's see here. Trish, what do we even think is happening? We're just playing so poorly this month. Is everyone just low-key sick? I mean, we know that the illness has been going around, but again, you can use that maybe a little bit as an excuse for like one game here or there. I don't know that you can look at the body of work of this month and really say like that's enough, because the bottom line is we have either games, like I was saying earlier, where the team just does not start and they don't start until very, very late, or you have moments like today where you do start well, you have the momentum, you look like you are very prepared for this team, you're playing up to your level of competition, all of that kind of stuff, and then you just watch it all fall away and seemingly nobody can stop it. And I think those two things kind of go beyond just maybe people feeling a little under the weather.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. I think there's also, it's just due to, especially tonight, right? Just lack of focus type errors. It's not like necessarily you're getting out hustled and pressured into these things. It's just, we're seeing the focus sometimes, we're not seeing it consistently enough. And that's the kind of thing we actually have seen a lot this year, whether they've been sick or not.
Yeah, and that still is the ultimate question, and I think it's the one question that, again, we're never going to be able to answer, but it's certainly my number one question with this group, which is just why is it so hard to find any semblance of consistency, right? Whether it's like an effort momentum kind of consistency, or a goal scoring consistency, or a playing defense apparently consistency. I thought that was the one thing like this group could sometimes do, but like that Chicago game, this game against Vegas, the D is really kind of gone out the window. So I just don't know. Goaltending has been inconsistent, right? Like it's very strange how this group has just not been able to find any form of consistency at all. Mason, 3 games in a row where the Kraken decide the puck is scary and just hand it to the other team. That does need to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned it earlier. It's a little tough when you're out there for a long time in the defensive zone. You do have to just make that change. Sometimes it does take that one player who is just going to kind of dig deep and find that moment within themselves where it's like, you know what? I'm just going to carry this in the zone. I'm exhausted, but I'm going to truly empty the tank. I'm going to use everything with the warning light on that I've got left, and I'm going to go into the zone, and then I'm just going to stick the puck between my skate blades along the wall while the rest of my team changes, but I'm going to be in the offensive zone, so when guys come and join me, maybe we can get something going. And it doesn't feel like in this or the Chicago game, we've really seen moments like that.
No, although I do want to give a little bit of credit where I think it's due here, and that Oliver Bjorkstrand had a couple of those tonight, where he was the end of a long shift and he out of the D zone skated it through everybody and just made a move to the corner and gave his teammates time to change. Like Bjorkstrand is one of the guys who's playing a little different than everybody else, and I noticed that from him twice tonight.
I mean, he is the guy when I was talking about why is there such a drastic difference in ice time between Shane Wright and his line mates. A lot of that is Shane maybe taking himself off a little early. Bjorkstrand never leaves. If you watch Oliver Bjorkstrand, just like a shift, like watch when the line change happens and then watch how long Oliver Bjorkstrand stays out there. It is impressive, and you're right. He does do that from time to time. Fusion Mix, anyone who thought the Knights would miss the playoffs this year didn't watch the playoffs last year. This is the best team in the West, bar none. That's saying something considering the years that Minnesota and Winnipeg are having. Being said, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the resumes over the last few years of each of those 3 teams, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Vegas. I think it's kind of clear one of them has a little bit more legit of a resume.
Yeah, definitely. Stratic, Canada invented hockey to create sadness to sell beer. It's a fact. Look it up.
Molson Corporation.
it's the way they do it. Yep. More talk about Philip Grubauer and everything there, and defense just leaving him out to dry. It really did feel that way. I think the last goal scored on Gru is the one that you could most make the argument he probably should have had, but at the same time, it looked like all 5 Kraken players were standing with their knees completely straight and not really doing anything either.
Yeah, exactly. They were just chasing the puck around. That's the shift where I'm just like, man, Vegas is toying with them. Like all the little passes and everything, the Kraken were just dead.
Yep. And then we do have the story here from Maddie. So this is awesome. She set up a photo shoot for us to take pictures in our Norwegian Christmas sweaters with the Christmas lights in town, and then pop the question at the end. That's perfect, because you've already got the photo shoot thing all set up, right? Like, so you're going to get the shot and everything like that. And I'm sure Maddie, then you're a little unsuspecting because of everything. That's some good stuff right there.
Yeah, that's some great planning and a much smoother way to get the photos you want rather than having my brother come and just like run around and duck and hide between trees like I had. So that's great. And I love, of course, this time of year too. It's something you're always going to think about and remember, during all the Christmas stuff, everything this time of year. It's going to bring back memories of that proposal. So happy for you, Maddie.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Anthony, felt like Grubauer was the only one who showed up for most of the night. I also just like kind of last thought on Grubauer, RJ. These last couple starts from him, he's just so much more aggressive. And I'm really wondering kind of what happened or what change in mindset he had that's caused him to play kind of really up at the top of his crease or even outside of the crease at times. And he's able to make some of these big saves that before you would maybe question, but I feel like it's just because he's really trying to cut down on the angles so much.
Right, and he's doing a much better job of that, getting out and cutting down the angle, and I mean, I think it's a pretty simple answer, it should be, as to why he's playing this way, and that's because earlier this season, he struggled so much because he was so deep in his net, and he didn't really
Mhm.
get out and cut down the angle, and he got burned on a lot of plays like that. So if that's what's happening to you, maybe try change something up, get out a little bit more aggressive, and so far it's working.
Yeah. David, the last few games have been so bad. Usually I'm a serial optimist, but I have nothing to say right now. I understand where you're coming from, David. Like
Yeah.
I do. These are
What's
tough.
the rule? You know, if you don't
They're
have
rough.
anything good to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's see. Brooke, I've been traveling and haven't had time to watch any games since Borgen was traded. Is this what happens when we trade my favorite player?
Apparently it is.
Yes, apparently Will Borgen was kind of the thing holding it all together. Although, again, right, a lot of these same issues were existing prior to the trade. This is just something that this core group of players has to figure out at some point, or it's just going to kind of, it's going to need to get broken up. Like that's it.
Right. I mean, there, and yes, you make the Borgen trade. You've had little moves, bring in Stevenson, Montour, some bigger moves, but ultimately, this is a core that really hasn't been changed that much. It's probably still a core 15 guys or so that's the same as it was at the start of not just this season, but last season. That's, I think, why we're seeing a lot of the same issues. And yeah, sorry about the Borgen trade, Brooke. I know that one must have hit you pretty hard. It's a kind of a rite of passage, I feel like, for every hockey fan when your favorite player gets traded. It's very rare that will just never happen. That, you know, maybe if you're a big Sidney Crosby fan or Ovechkin, you know, that it doesn't. But yeah, it's a tough thing that all hockey fans, or most hockey fans anyway, have to go through. So sorry it happens to be now for you, Brooke.
It is, and happy late birthday as well, Brooke. From Sergey, the typing in super chat's bad. I meant Yanni and Turbo will not be re-signed. Do we have anyone better? We have Maddie, Shane, and Kako. Who else has such high draft picks with none of them going? Kind of talking about what's going on there. So we talked a little bit about Matty Beniers' last post game, RJ, right? And the fact that he is in the longest goal drought of his career. Edzo was talking about it, talking about maybe he needs a reset, and you have a week off coming up, and maybe that can help. Or he's talked about just focus on defense and just kind of let the offense happen. It looks like maybe he's trying to focus a little bit too much on the offense. I still feel, reasonable in my kind of estimation of looking at things last post game, which was he is going to the blue paint. He is going to the high danger areas. That is where he is generating most of his shots on goal. It's just that he has an abysmal shooting percentage to the point where it cannot all just be him. At some point, luck has to factor in. That being said, he has not scored since November, 12th? That's an insanely long time.
Yeah, and at a certain point, you do have to produce given the draft pedigree. And so, there is an element of bad luck. I mean, even in this game, right, there was a rebound that kind of popped out net front, and he was just beaten to it by the Vegas defender. It was close. Edzo even was crediting him for going to the net on that one. And it's just, but yeah, at a certain point, he has to score. And there are some other teams, too, that have a lot of top draft picks that are not, and maybe you have one of them going or two, right? I think of Buffalo, where like
Right.
Owen Power is still really good, but you've got a whole bunch of guys that you drafted in the top 10 or close to it that are not really going or that are underachieving. So the Kraken aren't the only team that are having struggles with a lot of high draft picks, but it is tough when that is the case.
And what is the one thing that the teams like Kraken, Buffalo Sabres, the other teams that are kind of in that same boat with lots of high draft picks struggling, RJ, what do they all have in common right now?
I mean, well, besides being near the bottom of the standings,
Well,
what
that
else
was
we
it.
got?
That was it. The fact that it looks
Okay.
like they're all destined for top 10 draft picks again, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind
Columbus,
of
throw
where
them
they're
in
in right now.
Anaheim.
Right, exactly. Like that is a concern, and that is something that the Kraken will need to address. Again, there are bright spots. Matty Beniers' defensive play and his underlying numbers are very impressive. Shane Wright, like I said, all year, doesn't matter who you stick him with, his line is on a lot of nights going to be technically your most productive as far as generating offense, limiting the other team's offense. So there is stuff there that you can kind of, point to and say like, well, they're doing this stuff. But at the end of the day, right, good players find a way to go out and put points up on the board, put goals, up there for their team. And that is what you need to win. And that is something, or at least the number one thing that the Kraken do struggle with. Um, Ricky, Wright should be leading the forwards in minutes from here on out. Maddie needs a night in the press box. I think they'll probably give Maddie that week off potentially. I don't know. Maybe we see a Maddie scratch tomorrow, just given how bad that line was today. Maybe that happens. I don't think
It'd
I would do
surprise
it.
me. Yeah, it would surprise me given the break coming up, but I think they're going to hope that that break is his reset. And if this continues, if he still is not scoring or whatever, I think it'd be shortly after they come back that you think about scratching him.
Yeah. The one thing with Shane Wright, and I did talk about this a little bit earlier, RJ, or on that Discord comment that I made about when, this line change was announced and who he'd be playing with tonight. And I think this is, again, probably a topic better for the deep dive when we can go more in depth, but I'll at least bring it up here. Is Shane Wright is playing well right now, right? And that would lead you to think that, like Ricky was saying, right, he should play more minutes. You've been calling, you want him to get more than 15 minutes a night and all of that. And I do agree with that. And I think it should at least be experimented because you have nothing to lose right now. But I do wonder how much of this is because he is being sheltered as a third line center, right? He is being given, certainly at home, the best matchups, but even on the road, teams are looking at that line and being like, okay, let's maybe not throw out our biggest group against them, right? I do wonder how much of the success he's having is because of those matchups that he's getting. And also because, look, they want him to have those matchups because they're clearly trying to build his confidence. They're clearly trying to build a certain style of game with him. And if you start giving him 18, 19 minutes a night where he's having to go up against some of the top players in the league, if he had to go out there and match up against a Jack Eichel tonight, he's probably going to be too focused on dealing with that aspect of everything that he's not going to be building and developing his own game and kind of learning those lessons that they very clearly want to teach him. And I do wonder if that is why he's not getting the minutes, and in some ways why he shouldn't get those minutes for now, or at least until later in the year.
Right. And I understand what the vision is. I think you did a really good job of explaining it, right? They're trying to shelter him. They're trying to get him to play aggressive, right? And give him some matchups that you can be aggressive and take advantage of. And I think that's all well and good in a general sense. I think that is a good strategy, a good plan overall. But since that healthy scratch reset that he had earlier in the year, he's played 13 games. It's been a while, right? It's been over a month. He's played 13 games. He's got 12 points in those 13 games. He is feasting on that competition. I just want to see it once. And you can wait until you face a bad team. The next time you play a team in the bottom five, I don't know when that is, but you can wait until then. I just want to see it one time and see what happens, because it has not happened a single time. And I just want to know what it looks like. And I feel like you're really getting to the point in the season, if you talked about it, where you've got nothing to lose. And you kind of have to start looking at the long-term development of things. I want to see what it looks like when Shane Wright gets more than 16 and a half minutes of ice time. I just one time, let me see it to know what it looks like. And then you don't ever have to do it again. I won't make you ever do it again. I just want to see it once.
Right. Well, and the underlying numbers do kind of say that it should, in theory, work. Or if it doesn't work, it's not going to end badly for you. Right. Like in the sense, like it's not going to be a situation where he's going to get caved in and he's going to be massively overwhelmed. And that line's going to give up like 3 goals that night. Right. Like all the underlying numbers say that the floor for what that line should produce is really not that low. And so that would be another reason to also kind of just go ahead and run the experiment there.
Yeah. Blue White Flame says they face Blue Jackets January 9th. Perfect. That's the opportunity.
Go for it. Yeah, exactly. Stratic, Chandler Stevenson got a lot of applause when Vegas honored him tonight. Think they'll trade to get him back with the laughing emoji? Probably not.
Nope.
David, so many complimentary players, but no alpha dogs, at least not at the current time. I agree with that. And I do think that's why they're kind of doing everything with Shane Wright that they are doing, right? I think they are very actively trying to build that mentality within him, right? That aggressive mentality, as they've kind of put it, and as you put it, that is what they're going for with him.
Yeah, because it's crucial that he becomes an alpha dog. Like that's what they're going to need him to turn into.
Yeah. And then Stratic talking about being on Merrick's podcast. I just posted in chat to get Brian Burke's opinion on the Borgen trade, and Merrick asked my question to Berkey. By the way, there's a hilarious part of the Burke segment, but that I won't spoil. So I'm definitely going to have to go and listen to that because
the civilian thing.
I don't know.
I'm wondering if that's
I don't know.
Thing.
I'm gonna have to listen to it. Yeah, I mean, Berkey's the best. You and I have had the opportunity to hear from him a couple of times. I've had the opportunity to talk with him a couple of times. If you can get like his just like kind of off the cuff opinions on stuff, incredible, fantastic stuff every time. Trust me.
Yeah, awesome
uh,
person to just have in hockey, and I'm glad we get to hear from him so often too,
yes,
like
yes.
on shows like that. So
Yeah, Sam, all the forwards also had relatively even ice time as well. No forwards exceeded 18 minutes, none dropped below 12 minutes. I am looking at that, RJ, and really
I
like
noticed that as well.
Capo Caco is like very low, Brandon Tanev low, but that's kind of to be expected. But everybody else very much in a pretty narrow window as far as ice time, to the point where you could easily say, oh, that's just being on the power play unit that was out there a little bit longer than somebody else.
Yeah, and I think in a game that at a certain point kind of got out of hand, I think Bilesma kind of maybe just tried to even up that ice time a little bit more, especially with the back-to-back coming, right? You have a game tomorrow. You don't want anybody to play too much or get too tired when the score's 4-1, 5-1.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, what did you think of the power play unit kind of shakeups in the lineups that they did? I thought those looked pretty good, actually.
I agree, and I think the power play might be the biggest positive of the game for the Kraken, right? 2 for 4, and they looked pretty good doing it. I liked the shakeups on that unit. I liked some of the looks that they went to. I mean, the second one you could argue was a little bit more of a garbage time goal, but they were
Yeah.
still competing. They were still out there. What did you think of Edzo's comment before that power play? Saying that he would just send out 5 non-power play guys just as a message. I
Edzo's
know
an
that's just
old.
Edzo being
I was
Edzo,
gonna
you
say
know.
Edzo's maybe like an old school guy as far as like sending messages to the team and kind of what he would do. I understand that, right? Like I do get it. I think Dan has done a good job this year of sending subtle messages to the team, of holding players accountable with scratches or demotions in the lineup. I don't know that he necessarily needs to go with something that would be so theatrical.
Yeah, theatrical is a good word, right? All I was thinking though is that man, Edzo would be an entertaining coach. I would love to
Oh
see him
yeah.
coach an NHL team, not the Kraken necessarily, but I'd love to see him coach at this level. It'd
I
be
mean,
fun.
he has. There is footage of it. Go
That's
back
true.
in the archives, and you can
I'd like
probably
to see it in
find some.
HD, I guess is what I'm
Um,
saying.
yeah, yeah, but it is fun. Sam, I agree with need more animated shorts of Hey Berkey from back in the
Yeah,
day. Those
those
are
are great.
fantastic. Hearing those stories from Brian Burke. Lots of people on board with kind of what we were talking about for the lines. David, I hope they get some practice time over the holiday break. Maybe they can fix some things, although playoffs are a pipe dream right now. What is their kind of schedule? I haven't looked at
Yeah,
the
I have the
email.
schedule up. I
Yeah,
can
yeah. Kind of, because I know they're not. I think they're mandated by the CPA to not be able to work certain days around the holiday.
Right. So the Christmas break is from the 23rd to the 26th. And the CBA says, you can't have any team events, can't have them working. That is just players' time. So they get that off. So the schedule basically is, well, obviously today you had the game, tomorrow you have the game. And then the 23rd, everybody's going to go fly home or go wherever they're going to go for the Christmas break. That goes through the 26th. Then on the 27th, they've got a practice in the early afternoon at Rogers Arena in Vancouver. Because, of course, then the next day they play at 1 p.m. at Vancouver. And so that happens. And then on the 29th, the schedule doesn't go out that far, but I imagine on the 29th, they'll probably practice in Seattle at some point, probably in the morning, and then 30th, the game against Utah.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. Andrew, do you think we see Tanev and Gord gone at the deadline? I think if this trajectory holds, yeah.
Yeah, if the Kraken are 13th in the West, absolutely they're gone at the deadline. Yeah, you can't hang on to those guys when you know for sure you're not going to make the playoffs. And by that point, you'll know, certainly if they're still in the spot they're in now. So, yeah, if they're still in this position, yes. If they've got any kind of fighting chance, probably not, because the GM's job's on the line. So that's your answer.
Yeah, and David asking, Gordon Tanev are fan favorites, and how much value do you get from trading them? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think they are certainly fan favorites. I think people are going to be disappointed when they go. As far as value from trading them, I mean, Gord, maybe you could get a second. If you're
Kind
just
of what I
looking at
was
draft pick
thinking. Yeah,
compensation, maybe a second.
could build up a
Tanev,
bidding war there, maybe.
yeah, I bet you could get a third for Tanev. Playoff teams are going to want a guy like that on
He's
their
a
team.
he's a playoff producer too, if I remember correctly. His playoff numbers aren't that bad, or at least they were that one year with Pittsburgh where he was just like on fire.
Yeah, I will say, as much as we have criticized Ron Francis, he is really good at getting the most out of selling at the deadline.
He
If
is.
he's looking for draft picks, right, he can get some good picks for players. So I think Francis, I don't know, maybe he could even get a second for Tanev. It'd be a stretch. It'd be impressive, but
Yeah.
maybe he could do it.
Yeah. All right. The playoff numbers aren't as great as I remember for Brandon Tanev, but the one goals he would score a series were always very impactful goals. Let me
Yes,
tell you,
that's for
that
sure.
is what he does. And then terrible Lotus, puck on a shelf, poor Bjorkstrand. That was a fun sequence there. And I almost wish, RJ, that in those situations, the refs really let it go and let the players really just hammer away at that net to see which way it's going to bounce and fall. I think that would just be so much fun.
Yeah, safety issues aside, all those sticks up at head level, it would be really fun to see them kind of whacking away and see which way it goes, because that is a fun situation, and the commentary on it was brilliant.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that was definitely one of the more fun moments of the evening. Let's see, Light. I mean, this upcoming draft isn't deep at all. Ideally, you'd be getting a first to try and package it for a trade before the draft. Really, that is something, right? If you're able to get a second, somehow 2 seconds, this is one of those draft classes, I agree, where you kind of need to be picking as high up as possible, right? Like, I'm not usually on board with the idea of necessarily always tanking. Like last year, you didn't necessarily need to. This year, if you wanted to, wouldn't be the worst option in the world.
Yeah, and you've got a deeper prospect pool too. You've got a bunch of second and
Yes,
third
you
round
don't
guys
need
that are
them.
projecting pretty well.
Right. That's why I feel like it's fine that they gave up the kind of, the third round pick in the Capo Caco trade, right? And you give up Will Borgen, who would have also brought you in a draft pick as part of that trade, because you are getting an NHL kind of ready player who addresses a need for you and is kind of cost controlled, as he's still a RFA at the end of the year. Because you have all those prospects, and a lot of them are going to be ready fairly soon.
Yeah, and alternately, you could use those picks as currency in the offseason, right? If you are going to want to swap out a lot of the older core and make some trades there, having those picks to attach to guys or to go out and get players can be valuable too.
Yeah. Yeah. Kara asking, do you think Maddie and Capo will be good for each other's game once they get to know each other? You want to take
It's
it?
I'm sure. I think it's possible, right? I mean, Maddie has done well with power forwards. We saw what Yanni Gord was able to do on his line. So I think it's certainly possible. Right now, they have no chemistry, but it's something that in the longer term, I think could work. I know
Mhm.
are you still thinking, again, long term, forget what's working right now, what's not working right now. Are you still thinking maybe you'd want to see him with Chandler Stevenson and that might ultimately be the best fit for him?
Yeah, potentially. Like, although it's if you're going to play Oliver Bjorkstrand, like Oliver Bjorkstrand's arguably your greatest like expected goals for share guy on the team, as far as just
He's
everything
just
he
their best
does is
forward right now.
magic. Right, he
Whether it's the
is.
numbers or watching him, he's just their best forward right now. It's
Right.
not
So in
close.
that sense, if you're going to, I did not think honestly that they were going to break up that Shane Wright unit until they did. So I wasn't really thinking that that was an option. I do think that because the way Yanni Gord was able to play with Matty Beniers and how much better that made Matty look and how easy it was for him to get to the interior, having someone draw those defenders away. I think Capo Caco can play that game, and he can play that game very well. He just needs to know kind of which moments in the system and everything he needs to do those in. And I think honestly, you probably need somebody different than Jared McCann on the other side of it. Right. Because I think getting lost in all of that success that he was having with Yanni Gord on the wing, wasn't Jaden Schwartz also there on the other side? It wasn't Jared
Yeah.
McCann. Right. And so I think so much of what the Kraken do successfully is they have one player really go in hard on the forecheck, cause that initial disruption, cause that turnover if it was a dump and chase, or at least win that puck battle. And then they have somebody who's drawing defenders. And then that third player gets a lot of time and space in the slot or in a higher percentage shooting area. And I think with that line, a lot of it was Jaden Schwartz going in and doing the dirty work first, Yanni Gord pulling away the defense, and then Matty Beniers has that time and space to operate. I think if you were going to have that line again, you ideally want Capo Caco to be your net front guy because of his size, his ability to really fight off defenders. But if Jared McCann's the other wing out there with Matty, you're wasting Jared McCann if you're having him go in on the forecheck, be below the goal line, and trying to cause turnovers. So you kind of need to figure something out there. And I think that's one that is making me maybe pause on the longer term Matty Capo Caco pairing.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Right. One thing you could do is put Ellie Tolvin in there.
Yeah, he can
And
go do that. We've seen him do it with Shane.
Right. And I don't particularly feel like he was really responsible for what was going on with the Stevenson line and why it played better tonight. So
Yeah,
I
that's true.
think you
Yeah,
can
he
do that.
might. Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah.
might be expendable there.
So that would be an option. Chuck, tomorrow's game will be interesting as last time the Avs kept putting their top line out against Shane Wright's line, and it was a rough night for him. Hope he's got Bjorkstrand back with him. That is true. This could be an interesting one to see. They were one of the few teams to really target Shane.
Yeah, and that's another reason I could actually see his ice time being really low next
Mhm.
game, right? Is if they try and target him. I mean, one thing, because you don't have last change, you're on the road, right? If you're Dan Bilesma, well, one thing you can do, just keep sending other lines over the boards.
Yeah, that is true. Burn Creme talking in Vancouver does old school, not subtle moves, and it motivates that franchise. That is true, right? Like he will go for bigger things, not afraid to do that. I almost feel like in the Vancouver media market, you have to. And to be perfectly honest, I feel like some of that stuff he does in a weird way is to take pressure off of his guys because that media market is so crazy. So the more he can kind of put that attention on himself, it's probably helps out everybody.
Right, exactly. If you just dangle a piece of meat right outside the cage and all the media people go swarming at
Mhm.
it, you can kind of buy yourself a little bit of time with the actual team and be like, look, I've distracted them. Let's get back to doing what we need to do.
Yeah, like the Kraken media meals before the game. Just put it out there, and all the media members just magically show up into one room. If they ever really needed to get rid of everybody, that would be the way to do it.
Picky eater thinking you're just better than the rest of us.
I mean, I am. Stratic, is there anyone on an expiring contract who might get extended in February or whenever before the deadline? I mean, really, the only expiring deals that you have right now on the roster are Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev, which I can't imagine getting extensions, and now Capo Caco, who's an RFA. But given he's just been added to the team, that would kind of surprise me.
Yeah, Ty Karche, another RFA,
Oh,
but I'm
that's
actually
true.
going to, and then Riker, of course, and he'll get signed at some point, but I think that's going to go a little bit longer. I'll actually give you a dark horse name, though, that I could see maybe being extended, and it might be a good bit of business to do. Josh Mahura,
Oh,
because
yeah,
you're
that's
still going to
true.
have a spot open on the blue line next year. And yeah, Vilio Tavainen may be able to come in and fill that for a time, but I think you still might want to give him a little bit of cushion there. We know Mahura works with this blue line. I could see an extension for him, if anybody. Maybe he might want to parlay this season into whatever opportunity he can get out around the league to make the most he can. He's a
Mhm.
UFA. You got to go to market, get the best for what you can do. But if he likes the fit here, I think he might be a candidate.
Yeah, and then here, a cap question. Cap is a huge problem, though. Time to do a yard sale. Time to put Gru on waivers. Let go of Alexiak and Larson.
Yeah, as far as the cap being a huge problem, I mean, for this season, the Borgen trade got him a little bit of flexibility, but I imagine you mean long term. Uh, there are some cap issues with this team long term. It's the albatross contracts that we all know about, but they will still have a decent amount of flexibility this off season. You just kind of have to be able to wheel and deal. There are contracts you can get rid of. You don't necessarily have to, buy everyone out. As far as the Grubauer on waivers, that doesn't. I mean, yeah, it gives you a little bit of cap relief this year, but it's not something you strictly need. And it also, I mean, look, I think for the Grubauer thing, it's not going to matter, right? You either buy him out or you don't this offseason.
Right, and yeah, just because if he would clear waivers, nobody's going to take him off of waivers, and
Yes.
you're only allowed to bury so much of the cap hit in the minors, and so that's why it wouldn't really clear off that much space. And I agree with Ricky here. Cap isn't really a problem as long as they don't re-sign the vets. And I think
Yep.
that that's true. And, also throws in Riker's going to be expensive. I do wonder about that because I would imagine Riker would probably want to do a bridge deal, but I've said that before with some of these guys, and Ron Francis is somehow able to talk them into longer term ones.
Right. And so I wonder what direction he's going to want to go with Riker Evans. Because if you really believe in what he can do and you think he's going to be, look, they're already playing him 23, 24 minutes on certain nights, like when Vince Dunn is out. He's kind of shown flashes of that. I look at it's going to be an interesting offseason too, because he does not have arb rights. And
Mhm.
so he cannot go to arbitration. So that's a big piece of leverage that he doesn't have. And so if you are the Kraken and if you want to squeeze him, you kind of can because he doesn't have a ton of leverage. I don't think we'll necessarily see it. Offer sheets are extremely rare. So you can kind of squeeze him for money if you want. But the other thing you could alternately do is let's say you really believe in him. Why not offer him like 7 years times 5 million?
Mm-hmm.
Sign him till he's 30. You get him for basically his entire prime, right? The rest of his prime. And at
Mm-hmm.
5 million, that is a giant step up in pay. It is, the long-term security for him, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
$35 million for him. And if he continues to progress, and even if he's just a top 4 guy, right? If he's a really good
Mm-hmm.
second pairing defenseman, if that's what he tops out as, that's still a steal, especially with the cap going up to what it's going to be, right? That's less than Adam Larson is making right now. And so I don't know. I might think about offering him something like that, but you better be right on the player or else it could age poorly.
I think he's proven enough to show that he can be a top 4 guy. So I think you would be safe in offering a contract like that. If you're him, though, I don't know why I'd do that. Like I would probably take a
Yeah, yeah.
bridge deal
You want to bet on
over
yourself a
something
little
like
more than
that. I
that. Yeah.
mean, you're in your kind of true first full NHL season, and you're already half a point per game player as a defenseman.
Yeah.
It gives you a place to go from there.
Yeah. And then Ricky's saying Riker's going to ask for Broberg money. Riker is exactly who you offer sheet, like the Hawks have the cap to do it and he fits their timeline. Like all that stuff can make sense. There are like 3 or 4 offer sheets that like should be slam dunks every offseason that just makes so much sense, for so many teams to do. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because GMs all kind of have this gentleman's agreement. Also, I can't imagine, although Ron, we're not counting on Ron Francis being the GM over the offseason, but if he is, I can't imagine anybody offer sheeting Ron Francis because he's such a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Like they wouldn't do that. I mean, you look at who the 2 offer sheets, the GM that they were against this past offseason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is not Ron Francis. And so if he is the GM, there's no chance, I think. But
yeah, I will never say no. Like there's zero chance. I do not speak in absolutes, but it's as small a chance as you could possibly have, right? Like I think that is the thing there. And that kind of answers Jason's question of do we think Francis is the one making these decisions after the season ends? And the bottom line is if they miss the playoffs, and especially if they miss the playoffs by a decent margin, like if this team's out of it come the All-Star break, the 4 Nations tournament break, where it's, again, you're probably not mathematically eliminated, but for all intents and purposes, you are out of it. I think that, if you're ownership, you're probably starting, doing your due diligence at that point.
right. And I think as far as like, the odds that he's going to be the one making the decision, I think there are plenty of models that show the Kraken's playoff odds. And I think those things are very tied together. That's the expectation, not just that we've set, that's the expectation he set for himself at the start of the season. That's what success looks like to him making the playoffs. I think it's a reasonable expectation at this point. If they don't make it, I think he has to go. And so you look at the Kraken's playoff odds, they're 4% at this morning and dropping. That's the likelihood, I think, of him coming back.
I think there's actually something that's going to be a bigger reason why I don't think we see him back. And I think it's really the only reason, but I'm wondering if I should save that for deep dive and just kind of leave this as a spoiler.
Yeah,
for
leave
a
it a
couple days.
cliffhanger.
We're over.
I don't even know what it is. Like, you don't even have to tell me, so
I was
can
thinking
wait in
about this
suspense like
earlier.
everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something that if you were ownership, particularly, the way ownership behaved this past off season and all of the different areas that they were trying to address and everything, I think there's something else that could be, really is the reason I think anyway, he won't be at least general manager. Again, there's the option of moving him kind of out of that role, but he's still with the organization. But I think as far as making those certain decisions, I think there would be a reason not to. So I will leave that there. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this post-game live. I want to thank the super chats and everybody who gave those. Again, congrats to Maddie on the engagement. That's fantastic. And a huge shout out to Queen Anne Beer Hall for supporting us all of these years and being back on the post game live and us being able to talk about it. Soon enough, we'll be able to talk about wins with the Queen Anne Beer Hall, especially these road games and being able to celebrate at Queen Anne Beer Hall and everything on these post games. I do know that, at some point in the rest of the season, those will happen. I hope. It may not always feel likely, but they'll happen.
Yeah. And if you're itching for more content too, the podcast with them is up on our YouTube channel as well. I mean, I figure most of you are watching this on YouTube, so just go right to the channel, and it's about 45-minute conversation with the guys from Queen Anne Beer Hall. So feel free to check that out if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.